Hi, I'm Courtney Baker, and this is AI Know-How from Knownwell, helping you reimagine your business in the AI era. If you listened to last week's show, you know we aired the first half of our recent webinar called Building a Growth Engine Beyond the Sale. In part one, we walked through the math behind two firms with very different NRR and operating discipline and how those differences compound over time. This week, we jump right back in where we left off. David takes us deeper into what commercial ops actually looks like for the account management function and beyond. We talk about weekly portfolio triage, monthly operating cadence, shared accountability, and how AI helps surface signals that were previously invisible. And if you haven't listened to part one yet, do yourself a favor and go start there. The math makes this half of the conversation even more powerful. Now, let's dive in.
Let's take a look at what we see as the component parts of an engine that drives revenue beyond the sale, right? Now we're moving from the why to the how. When we talk about shifting right and building a post-sales revenue engine for your organization, this isn't something that happens overnight. It's a maturity journey where each layer builds on the other. Level one, let's start here. This is what I call client operations. This is the visibility layer. This is the baseline. You've got to start here. It's an operating rhythm for account management and client services that surfaces risk and growth signals weekly, providing leadership with kind of a shared view of portfolio health so that they know where to focus and why, and they can drive execution and accountability against it. Level two, it's what I call commercial operations. This is the integration level where it starts to impact the health of the business. Let's remember something really important here, Courtney. A lot of times we look at these client relationships and we say, oh, that's a customer success thing. That's an account management thing. No, serving your client is a holistic company thing. The poor person that sits in that account management role, that customer success role, right? They're a facilitator of the entire organization, pulling them together. And so we have to take this operating discipline that we have in the atomic client organization that we've built in level one, and we've got to build it to be integrated into the entire organization. And this is where we break down silos and where RevOps becomes a team sport. It's integrating that client data into the operating cadence of the business into the rest of the organization. It's bringing finance, sales, and delivery into the same rhythm and making sure the knowledge that we have around our commercial accounts impacts our business forecasts, impacts how we deliver, how we sell. All of it comes together and is integrated with the same rigor and discipline, can influence everything that touches it. The final stage is commercial enablement, and this is the strategic layer. This is where we get to take advantage of that operating discipline that's taken us to the next level, but now we get to take it exponentially far. This is the pinnacle. Once you have the data and the integration, you can finally get strategic. You stop reacting to last week's fires and you start doing proactive planning against a disciplined operation.
You know, David, what I think is so important to note is that this gives names to a lot of things that frankly might otherwise just fall through the cracks. You know, in most firms, these three pillars are just part of everyone's job, which means they're no one's job.
Yeah.
You know, if I kind of sit back as a CMO and I look at these almost as confidence layer, you know, if you take client ops, that gives you your client-focused department the confidence and ability to drive toward retention and growth.
Totally.
When you layer up to commercial ops, it gives your commercial organization that confidence and accountability to trust forecast and what is actually happening is going to happen. And then that commercial enablement gives your commercial org the ability to stop being order takers and actually be strategists, really do that strategic thinking.
Totally true, Courtney. Yeah, so true. I could not agree more. And we talk about being client centric and customer focused and all these buzzwords, But have we really operationalized that, right? Do we have systems,
Yeah.
processes, and data that allow us to be that? And and I would say no. By and large, very few B2B services organizations are truly client-centric, truly have the data that they need, the rigor and the discipline they need to deliver on that promise. You're totally right. If we look at how you actually instill these disciplines in level 1 and 2, it's not magic. It boils down to 3 very simple things. I want to say something though. Simple is not easy. And so what we're about to talk about, you're gonna be like, of course, but that doesn't mean it's easy. And we've got to establish the rigor and the discipline around what we know is true once it's called out. If you have these, you have a system for revenue growth. If you don't, you'll continue to run the post sale off of vibes. So, requirement number 1 for each one of these levels is clear roles and responsibilities. You must have a clear owner of every single signal. Who is responsible for the renewal? Who owns the relationship health? You have to have people that you can hold accountable. And even more importantly, people that know they're empowered to pull the on cord and say, it's time to stop. We got to look at this, to rally the organization, to drive forward, to fix problems, to drive growth. Requirement number 2, a disciplined meeting cadence. This is the heartbeat. It's what pumps blood through the organism. You show up at the same time every single week or month, and you drive the rhythm of the business. It's not ad hoc fire drills all the time. It's just steady, predictable drumbeat, getting ahead of problems, opening opportunities with rigor and discipline based on what the data says, not what you think or feel. Requirement number 3 fuels that data-driven decision-making. It's a regular reporting cadence. You need the data to fuel the meetings. This is the truth filter that allows for data-driven decision-making rather than managing by gut feel. Now, I want to share a little bit about what this data needs to give you insight into. Ultimately, the purpose of your client health, commercial health, isn't just about whether they're happy or not. It is about the propensity for that client relationship to sustain and grow over time. That's how you drive net revenue retention. And too often, an NPS score, a CSAT score, our health checks are just, are they happy? This isn't a happiness score, right? We want our clients to be happy, but what we care about is really driving retention and growth. And so we need to look at the tape. We need to look at the research to say, how does this actually happen? And the research is very, very clear. There are 3 core measures that are absolutely essential, but really hard to measure. The first one is that retention and growth is dependent on the perception of service quality. What's really, really important here is the word perception, right? It doesn't matter if our internal quality controls are saying we have incredible quality. If the perception of the client is that it's not strong, and we see this come out in the research all the time, incredibly high quality deliverables that are perceived low, churn. The exact opposite is true. You can actually have very low actual service quality, but if it's perceived to be high, it will be retained and it will grow. So you've got to manage that perception, which means you've got to measure that perception. So the number 1 thing is the perception of service quality. Number 2 is the strength of the interpersonal relationships. And the interpersonal relationships, not just at a buyer level, not just the executive sponsor, is the entire B2B team. Are they not just getting along, but can they collaboratively and cohesively work together to move the needle for the business? And the strength of that business relationship matters. And if you measure that and you're continually strengthening it, you're more likely to retain and to grow your accounts. And then finally is commercial alignment. Are you as a service provider seen as a strategic provider who's in the room, advising them, helping them see around corners? All of those types of things.
David, that is super helpful. And sometimes there are pieces and parts of these things, but usually what I see is like, obviously people have meetings to talk about the health of but it's not a disciplined meeting cadence. It's not clear expectations or why we are here to have the kind of reporting that you're talking about to drive the business forward. So I'm curious, what does level 2 look like for this?
Yeah. Yeah. So that is the basics that you just talked about. And
Mhm.
I want to say one thing about that data. The data is what brings it alive. It's this objective reality that empowers us to have the disciplined meetings you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
You think about that pre-sales world where why is a pipeline review so productive? Because we have data that informs our
Yeah.
discussion and fuels it. That's what we're going for, right? So let's go to that next level. Once you have those three things, you've got the roles, you have the meetings, you have the reports, right? That data happening inside your account management team. Then you move to level 2, the commercial operations, right? So you're running the atomic account management, customer success team with that discipline. Now you're going to take that discipline and you're going to begin to influence the rest of the organization. This is a really big shift. Commercial ops is not an account management sport, it's a team sport, right? At this stage, we're taking those same three elements, the roles, the meetings, the reporting, that data-driven decision making, right? We take them to the entire organization evolved around our clients. In most firms, account management or customer success is an island. And here, the goal is to bring those same disciplines to the mainland, right? To integrate them in the same way that sales and marketing have been integrated over the years, right? Suddenly, your head of delivery, your CFO, your head of sales are all looking at that same data that's coming out of this powerful client engine, right? And that same reporting cadence is fueling and advising the way they're operating. They're attending very similar rhythm of meetings and taking the exhaust of those meetings to influence their operations and vice versa. When delivery sees that something's slipping, sales knows that the renewal is at risk, right? When finance sees a delay in payment, we all know that there may be an issue that's going on, right? And it gets so much more complex than those simple examples. So now when we see a risk, the whole company swarms it. It's truly a team sport, right? It's influencing our forecasts, right? It's integrated into the business. And when we see an expansion opportunity, sales and delivery are already aligned on the solution before the client even asks. We're breaking down these silos. We're
Yeah.
sharing information and it's fueling our growth.
So what you're saying is this is where we finally fix the leaky bucket, which I'm sure everybody in sales and marketing can get behind. So when the entire organization is integrated into that client life cycle, nothing falls through the cracks because frankly, there's no cracks between departments anymore. You stop, losing revenue because one hand didn't know what the other hand was doing.
Yeah, and that would happen all the time, not because people are bad people, but I
Right.
remember when I was running Three Pillar, had 2,500 employees and, hundreds of clients that we were serving. And there was a gap in just understanding. And sales would say
Yeah.
one thing, delivery would say the opposite, account management was somewhere in the middle or had a totally different perspective. And my job became trying to understand and figure out who was more right than the others. And they were all trying to be right, but there was
Right.
no objective data. That's where we go back to this data. So for a long time, there's been a push for services firms to be more client centric, right? We recently did a podcast episode about why it's time to move towards what we call the account-based enterprise, right? We have account-based marketing. It's not just about marketing. It's about how do we have an account-based enterprise that's truly client-centric, where your world doesn't so much revolve around client centricity as it does around ensuring you have a healthy commercial relationship. Both ways, it's mutually beneficial between you and your clients. And applying this kind of commercial operations rigor is a massive step in that direction.
Okay, that's really helpful. Okay, so what's next after that, David?
Well, so we've built the operating foundation, right? And because you have the discipline of level 1 at the atomic account management, customer success level, and then you have the integration of level 2, the business level, now you can finally move from defensive to offensive, right? Most firms spend nearly all of their time defending their current footprint and trying to plug the holes in the leaky bucket, right? At level 3, you're building proactive expansion plans. You're doing deep dive account planning based on real-time objective data, not just year-old aspirations, not just the gut feel of one person, right? You're no longer just trying to survive the next renewal. Now you're building a firm that grows 15 to 20% year over year just from its existing account base. Right? That's the magic. When you can get past 110%, 115%, 120% net revenue retention, that's where the fastest growing firms come from. That's how you scale predictably. You move from accidental growth to deliberate, system-driven expansion. And that's the science, that's the machine we're trying to create.
Yeah. It really kind of feels like moving from being a vendor to being a partner for your
I love that.
clients. At this level, you're so aligned with the client's future that you become indispensable.
That's exactly right, Courtney. And it is this discipline, this rigor, and the data that informs it that allows you to actually do it. It's becoming indispensable. It is how you become company B. And to be indispensable, you have to understand the context you're in, operating in. You have to understand the perception of service quality. You have to understand the strength of your relationship, not based on how somebody feels, but based on the reality of what's going on and what that client is actually feeling. And that's where you drive world-class retention and expansion rates. So,
David, can I chime in here really quick? Because I have a question for you. I'm going to throw one in midway.
okay.
Here close to the end, but maybe one you weren't expecting. You mentioned your time at 3Pillar, and these people over here were saying this thing, these people were saying this. What has changed? Like, what has changed? Why didn't you have this back then?
Yeah. I mean, the really easy answer is artificial intelligence. We have come so far with being able to leverage natural language as an input, right? Historically, customer analytics has all been about math algorithms on top of transactional data. And in most B2B services firms, you don't actually have transactional data that is relevant to the perception of service quality, that is relevant to the strength of interpersonal relationships, that is relevant to how aligned commercially your firms are. Those are unmeasurable things until we can actually take natural language and measure with it, right? And so this ability to infer, right? The inference engines that we now have are really, really powerful. And dare I say, are actually more rich with data than any of the data that we ever had, because it is a representation of real life, not an abstraction into a transaction.
That's awesome. Thank you for clarifying that. It's just really helpful, I think, for everybody listening to kind of understand what has changed to bring us where we can actually do this today. And if you're actually still filling out a spreadsheet, don't feel bad. That's right. where the world has been up until this point. Thanks as always for listening and watching. Don't forget to give us a review on your podcast player of choice. At the end of every episode, we like to ask one of our AI friends to weigh in on the topic at hand. So, hey, Gemini, welcome to the show. Today, we're talking about why net revenue retention above 100% changes everything in B2B firms. Any advice for leaders trying to operationalize that?
Hitting over 100% net revenue retention is the ultimate cheat code because your revenue compounds without you having to chase down a single new logo. To actually pull that off, you've got to flip your customer success team from playing defense against churn to playing offense on upgrades.
And now you're in the know. Thanks as always for listening or watching. We'll be back next week with more AI applications, discussions, and experts.
Hey, if you made it this far in the episode, first of all, thank you. And second, we know that AI is changing all the time, and so we've got you covered. Here is another great episode for you to watch to stay in the loop on what's happening in AI and business. And second of all, we'd love for you to subscribe. You can do that right here. I've always wanted to do that, by the way. So do that now. That would be great.